We come here today initially to celebrate and to congratulate congressional leadership in both the House and the Senate for a remarkable victory that occurred last month. On June 30th, after 81 years, Congress finally decided to let a wasteful spending program expire. On June 30th, after 81 years, Congress decided finally one example of corporate welfare that Washington could stop sending taxpayer monies to benefit wealthy contributors. On June 30th, after 81 years, the Export-Import Bank expired. The Export-Import Bank is a classic example of cronyism. It is a classic example of corporate welfare. The Export-Import Bank puts taxpayers on the hook for hundreds of billions of dollars in loans that go to foreign countries, loans that go to foreign corporations. The taxpayers are risking their dollars in order to benefit foreign countries and to benefit giant corporations. The majority of the benefit from the Export-Import Bank goes to a handful of gigantic corporations. And the reason that this corporate welfare program has existed for 81 years is because of the operation of the Washington cartel. What's the Washington cartel? It's career politicians in both parties, Democrats and Republicans, who get in bed with lobbyists and special interests in Washington and loot the taxpayers to give it away to their big money contributors. You know, Democrats are fond of railing against big business, and yet just about every Democrat is lined up supporting the corporate welfare of the Export-Import Bank. Any Democrat that wants to give a passionate speech about how he or she is a populist ought to be asked, well, if you're such a populist, why are you supporting risking billions of dollars of taxpayer monies to benefit a handful of giant corporations? And then when it comes to Republicans, you know, in campaign seasons, every Republican is a conservative. There are a lot of campaign conservatives in the United States Congress. Well, now's when push comes to shove, where we discover if people are merely campaign conservatives or they actually are going to be practicing conservatives, consistent conservatives. Two men can make this decision: John Boehner and Mitch McConnell. If John Boehner and Mitch McConnell stand up tomorrow and say, we will simply do nothing. You know, if there's one thing Congress is good at, it's doing nothing. John Boehner and Mitch McConnell say we will simply not allow the Export-Import Bank to be reauthorized. That will ensure this corporate welfare program goes away. About a month ago, there was a great battle in Congress over TPA. And House leadership insisted, Senate leadership insisted, there was no corrupt deal. We didn't trade this for a bunch of K Street lobbyists writing checks to members of Congress on both sides. That is great news. I salute them for saying there is no corrupt deal. Now is the opportunity to prove it. If there is no corrupt deal, then congressional leadership should stand with House conservatives, with Senate conservatives, to say we mean what we say. You know, for any conservative, if we're going to talk about welfare reform, if we're going to talk about helping people get off government dependency and back on their own feet, then we need to start with getting giant corporations off of dependency on the government at the expense of the taxpayers. We need to start, and by the way, the Export-Import Bank expired 2 weeks ago. You notice the sky hasn't fallen. In fact, all of the people who are receiving these taxpayer benefits, these taxpayer guarantees, what are they doing? They're going to the private sector. They're going to the private sector. They're getting the loans in the private sector. It all works fine, but you know what? It's easier. It's cheaper to loot the federal fisc and say, gosh, the taxpayers don't require any accountability. The bribery, the corruption at the Export-Import Bank, enough is enough. I call upon Democrats, if you are a populist, if you mean the words you say on the campaign trail, stand up and say enough is enough for the corporate welfare. And I call on Republicans, if you are more than a campaign conservative, if you are in fact a principled, Constitution-believing, liberty-loving conservative, then stand up and act on it.
Do you believe that he's against the Export-Import Bank, and what can you do? Because it looks like the votes are there in the Senate to reauthorize the bank.
Well, as I said, we are here gathered today to celebrate a conservative victory. It's interesting, with a Republican majority, we haven't had a lot of conservative victories. This is one. And we're here today to praise Mitch McConnell and John Boehner. They have the opportunity to deliver on their campaign rhetoric, and I am hopeful that actions will follow words, and every person here will gladly celebrate strong Republican leadership if we in fact have strong Republican leadership.
Senator Cruz, you're meeting with Donald Trump this afternoon.
Let's keep the questions on Export-Import Bank. I'm happy to answer questions elsewhere.
Export-Import Bank,
Let's keep it on the substance.
What are the next stages? This expiring will cost thousands of jobs. What's your answer back to that?
Whenever there is corporate welfare, whenever there is the Washington cartel picking winners and losers, inevitably the politicians claim they are benefiting jobs. What they don't count in that is all the jobs that are lost, all the taxpayer money that is taken. You know, the losers if the Export-Import Bank is reauthorized? It's all the single moms waiting tables. It's all the truck drivers. It's all of the hardworking men and women who don't have lobbyists in Washington, who just go and try to provide for their kids. Those are the losers, because Washington is very good at feeding from the trough. The giant lobbyists who write checks to everyone who keeps funneling billions of taxpayer dollars to them. This is a battle. Do you stand for the rich and powerful who corrupt Washington and use this institution against the American taxpayer, or do you stand with the taxpayer and the workers? This is an easy question for anyone on right or left. I praise Bernie Sanders for standing on the right side of this issue, but I would ask, where is Hillary Clinton? I praise Barack Obama when he was in the Senate for standing on the right side of this issue, saying this is pure corporate welfare. I would ask, what would President Barack Obama say to Senator Barack Obama for why he's supporting pure corporate welfare? Every politician, I would call upon you, just do what you said you would do.
Senator, there's speculation that they're going to try to attach XM to the highway bill to reauthor or to revive it. Would you be willing to filibuster the highway bill if that were to happen?
I am willing to use any and all procedural tools to stop this corporate welfare, this corruption from being propagated. But I want to give an opportunity for Bill Flores and Jim Jordan to talk about on the House side the fights that they're fighting. And I would note also that Jeb Henserling has been tremendously effective on this issue. He's here with us in spirit. He just couldn't physically join us. But Bill, Jim, do you want to share your thoughts? We have not yet received a response. The response is due today, so a number of us joined together asking the head of the Export-Import Bank to lay out the wind-down plan. I'm hopeful we will receive the response today, and we certainly will make it public if and when it comes in. You know, I'll note the last two questions talked about, is this a conflict between Washington working? Listen, when people talk about Washington working, it's a little bit like two wolves and a sheep sitting down to vote on what's for dinner. That's the outcome. When this institution, when the Washington cartel works in the Washington manner, what happens is career politicians who are Republicans and Democrats sit down with the lobbyists. The lobbyists say, we'll write checks to both sides. We don't care who wins, because both of you do the exact same thing. Both of you grow and grow and grow government. Our last two presidents, in 2001, George W. Bush became president. The national debt was $5 trillion. When George W. Bush left the White House, the national debt was $10 trillion. 2009, Barack Obama became president. The national debt was $10 trillion. Today, it is over $18 trillion. Two presidents have increased our debt over $13 trillion. By the end of Obama's presidency, two presidents, a Republican and Democrat, will have tripled the debt that your children and grandchildren will spend their whole lives paying off. The way Washington works is simple. You spend for everything and bankrupt the country. So yes, This town knows how to work to benefit the rich and powerful. What we're trying to do is help our elected officials work to represent the men and women of America, our constituents, instead of the wealthy power brokers here in Washington.
Last question.
The issue of the debt, the bank has contributed in the last several years back to the deficit with a surplus. Do you think that as a conservative there needs to be an offset, or do you think it's okay to just sort of axe out that contribution they've been making for years now?
So the bank carries out a practice that Washington is quite familiar with, which is called cooking the books, and it is only bogus accounting that suggests that the bank reduces the deficit. In fact, the bank is costing significant amounts, and even more importantly, there are hundreds of billions of dollars of loan guarantees that taxpayers are on the hook for. Remember, for years, the same Washington cartel said Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have no risk to the taxpayer, none whatsoever, guaranteeing hundreds of billions, guaranteeing trillions of loans. It's all free magic money until the whole thing comes crashing down. The idea that giving away taxpayer money somehow reduces the deficit is a fiction that only politicians in Washington could try to sell.